It's just a box.
I am Norma Louise, an ordinary housewife living in Virginia in 1976. I lead a quiet life with my husband Arthur and our son Walter. Arthur worked at NASA and I taught at a private school. We weren't wealthy, but we were a happy family of 3, and I thought it would go on forever until the day the mysterious box appeared. Early one morning in Virginia, before dawn, it was almost 6 o'clock when the doorbell rang. I was still half asleep when I was awakened by the harsh sound. I hurried to the door only to see a black sedan drive away. On the porch, there was an inconspicuous-looking box. Arthur and I decided to wait until breakfast to see what the box was. Our son Walter was sitting at the dinner table, and I opened it carefully. It was a wooden box with a button inside, but protected by a lock cover. There was also an envelope with a card with a sentence on it.
Mr. Stewart will call upon you at 5 p.m.
None of us had heard of the name. That day, we went out separately as usual. Walter went to school, and I went to the high school where I taught. But that morning's class was more embarrassing than ever. One student, Charles, asked me why I was limping and publicly demanded that I show my foot to the class. I froze, but eventually I took off my boots and socks, exposing my misshapen foot under the gaze of dozens of pairs of eyes. Then the principal called me into the office to say that the school was canceling the tuition discount for the children of faculty members. I felt dizzy. The news that our family's economy had been stretched to the limit like a rubber band was a blow. Even more disturbing to me, his nose started bleeding as he spoke. At that moment, I had a vague feeling that something was getting out of control. Meanwhile, Arthur had a frustrating day in a NASA lab. He watched a press conference on Mars exploration, and the ship was equipped with a camera he designed himself. He was designing my prostheses while he waited for the results of his astronaut application, but the result was incomprehensible. He was rejected because he failed a psychological test. Arthur is the calmest, sane, and reliable person I know, and the result is unreasonable. When I got home in the evening, a man with severe burns on his face appeared at my door. He called himself Arlington Stewart. He was well-dressed, spoke calmly, and even had a strange charm, but the scar on his face kept me staring. He said it was his box. He handed me a key to open the button lid. His proposal made me gasp. Press the button and you'll get $1 million. At the same time, someone in the world you don't know will die. I could hardly speak. He gave me a $100 bill as a gesture of good faith. He said he couldn't be identified, and I couldn't tell anyone but Arthur. I still had too many questions to ask, and he had already left. A few hours later, Arthur came home from work. I told him exactly what had happened to me. He also told me about the strange things that had happened today. We argued for a while whether we should believe the stranger or whether it was all just an elaborate prank. We decided to lock the box in the safe and go to the theater to relax. But even in the theater, my heart couldn't be at peace. Neither could Arthur. We tried to think about the meaning of the box one by one, but we didn't notice that someone was watching us in the dark. When we got home, we took the box out again. Arthur opened the bottom of the box only to find it empty. How the hell does this work? Without cameras or sensors, how would they know if we pressed a button? It's all counterintuitive but convincing. I looked at that foot and thought about the money that would change almost everything. I thought about Walter, about the loan we owe, about the freedom I never had in my life. The next day after work, Arthur's colleague Jeffrey received a call from his wife saying she had witnessed a suspicious kidnapping at the supermarket. He immediately told her to go home and lock the door. Little did he know he himself had been involved. That night, Arthur took out the $100 bill and made sure it was real. He handed it to me. I looked at it and my heart beat like a drum. We didn't say much more. The fingers almost moved on their own, and I pressed the button. At that moment, I knew we could never go back. That night, I pressed the button. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the police received a call saying that screams and gunshots had been heard. By the time they got to the scene, a woman had been shot and killed, and a little girl was hiding in the bathroom. What I didn't know at that moment was that this murder was tied to something we were already involved in. Soon after, Stewart reappeared with a suitcase full of bills. $1 million. Cash, clean and untraceable. Arthur ran after him, trying to give him the money back. He shouted, but Stewart didn't even look back and just drove away calmly. Meanwhile, my father, Burns, was investigating the murder at the police station. The deceased turned out to be the wife of one of Arthur's colleagues, Jeffrey, who was missing. Witnesses said they saw him flee the scene after gunshots rang out. That night, Arthur finally fitted me with the prosthetic limbs he made by himself. At that moment, I stood up without a trace of pain on the soles of my feet. It was the first time in my life that I was truly free to walk. We attended my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner together. At the banquet, Charles, the student who had humiliated me in public, was working as a waiter. Mom and Dad were running the lottery, and Arthur won a brown box that looked almost exactly like the death box. Charles gave him a peace gesture that sent chills down my spine. We opened the box, and inside was a photo of Stewart before he was disfigured. When Arthur and Charles were drinking together, he gave Charles the license plate number, hoping he could use police resources to find out Stewart's identity. At this point, a nosebleed waiter ran up to tell me that someone had called me. I picked up the phone, and it was Stewart. His voice warned me coldly that I shouldn't tell the police the license plate number, or we would suffer the consequences. As soon as the phone hung up, I heard Arthur yelling at Charles outside. I rushed out to pull him away, fearing he would make a bigger mess. We got back to the car, only to find that the window had been written, "No exit." Charles made that gesture again, as if to say, "You are trapped." Back home, Nanny Dana was still trying to put Walter to sleep. She tried her best to ignore the blurry shadows outside the window. Arthur offered to take her back to the hotel.
"Had that blood on your hands."
On the way, she began to say something ambiguous, as if she knew what we were going through. When Arthur asked her for advice, she said,
"Look into the light."
Immediately afterwards, she developed a nosebleed and then suddenly fainted. Arthur looked through her bag and noticed that her ID card had another name on it, Sarah Matthews. He hid his ID in his pocket. Dana woke up flustered, saying it wasn't safe and urging him to run away. When she walked into the hotel, the other guests were all standing silently at the door, as if they knew who she was, and the walls of her room were covered with pictures and maps of our family. When he got home, he told me all about it, and we finally understood who Stewart meant by employees. He also found that Stewart was indeed in the photos of NASA's early Mars mission. He was a member of the mission. The next day, the phone rang again. It was Stewart. He threatened me again, implying that we were about to face dire consequences. I asked to meet him. He said he was in the backyard right now. I went to the window and saw a man standing outside my house, motionless, with his mouth wide open as if screaming, but no sound. The phone hung up and Stewart returned to his secret office, hidden behind the NASA wind tunnel. At the same time, NSA agents went to NASA to request higher-level permissions, including access to the hangar and the lunar module. They did not explain the reason, only saying that NASA employees would be used. Although Arthur's boss, Cahill, was extremely dissatisfied, he could only nod in agreement. Arthur went to the police station to find my father to check the license plate information. They found that the car turned out to be NASA. His expression changed dramatically when he saw the picture of the deceased, because the woman died exactly when I pressed the button. He took his father to the crime scene and stole another photo of Stewart, as well as a mysterious document titled The Manual of Human Resource Exploitation. And I was shopping with my mom when a strange woman approached me. She told me that NASA knew and acquiesced in Stewart's actions because they couldn't stop them. Their test subjects shared common characteristics: under 40, happily married, with children. She handed me a note with a number on it, told me to go to the Richmond Library to find the answer, and whispered to me, "Don't trust anyone, including your husband." Arthur and I split up to the library and followed the number clues. They have their clues and I have my mission. I found surveillance footage of a NASA hangar that had been struck by lightning, and I saw footage of Stewart at a press conference. Suddenly, two women appeared in front of me and wanted to take me to meet Stewart. This time, he didn't beat around the bush and said his starting point bluntly. He had been struck by lightning, and since then, he has started a conversation with a being who manipulates lightning. He asked me how I felt the first time I saw his disfigured face. I looked into his eyes and said slowly, "It's love." He was stunned. "I understand you," I continued, as if all my pain were magnified and projected onto my face. After he heard this, he reached out and asked me to hold his hand. Without hesitation, I took his hand. Then everything fell into darkness. That night, I was fast asleep in bed when suddenly a cold current and a heavy impact woke me up from my dream. Arthur and a large ball of water seemed to fall from the sky and hit me directly. He looked at me in shock, but I didn't understand what was going on. Without our knowledge, a conversation was taking place between God and man. Cahill met privately with a NASA worker. They talked about Stewart, the mysterious and terrifying man. It turned out that he was no longer human. 5 months ago, he was struck by lightning and died instantly. But a few hours later, in a morgue freezer, he was secretly transferred to the military's Gawan hospital, where he has since acquired unusual abilities. Wounds heal as they are, cells no longer age. Stewart heard all this quietly. I can't forget what happened to Arthur at the library that day. There he found a book and a story about a NASA employee who had been struck by lightning. As he prepared to leave with the materials, the library seemed to come to life. Everyone stared at him, as if he had touched some kind of taboo. In the end, it was the woman, Stewart's wife, Clement, who blocked his way. She led Arthur to a strange room, where 3 portals appeared on the floor. She told Arthur that there could only be one. 1 to salvation, 2 to eternal destruction. She started the portals with blood and the water column rose into the air. Arthur remembered Charles' gesture at the dinner party and walked into the second portal without hesitation. Then he appeared in our bed. Our lives were completely derailed. As we danced at our sister's wedding that night, Arthur whispered to me about the white light he saw. It was like a warm embrace, not here or on the other side, somewhere in the middle, without the despair of the human heart. But the illusion of happiness is always short-lived. Arthur walked out of the wedding scene suddenly unwell. He didn't come back. When Walter and I realized something was wrong, we were about to chase away when a few men took us away. I later learned that Arthur met Jeffrey that night. It was the man who had lost his daughter. He forced Arthur into the car and told him that our son had been taken to the hotel and was on the line. Jeffrey had gone through the same thing, killing his wife to save his daughter. Stuart made him choose, exactly like Arthur now, and their truck, after being stopped by a man dressed as Santa Claus, was involved in a car accident. When the police arrived, only Jeffrey's body was found. Arthur appeared outside a NASA hangar. Cahill was waiting for him there, saying, "Your next choice will have far more impact than you can imagine." We were taken home. Stuart was in our living room, waiting for the final test. He had locked our son Walter in the bathroom, the child who could neither see nor hear at the moment, and we had to decide between two options. The first, we carry all our money and a crippled son for the rest of our lives. The second option, Arthur kills me, Walter will regain his sight and hearing, and the money will be deposited into the child's adult account. Arthur was furious. He raised the gun Stuart had left for us and aimed it at Stuart, but Stuart only smiled coldly. "If you kill me, you will only go to prison. No one will believe your story. Someone will take my place soon." Then Stuart left, leaving the two of us standing in front of the locked bathroom door. We dared not force the door for fear of hurting Walter, who was unconscious inside. My heart was broken. Watching Arthur stand in front of the door in pain, I knew I couldn't let my son live in darkness and silence all his life. Arthur and I kissed for the last time. Then he pulled the trigger. At that moment, my world was quiet. When I closed my eyes, I seemed to see someone in the distant neighbor's house pressing that button. Our fates seemed to have been swapped. The police arrived, but instead of shoving Arthur into the police car, they took him into a black NASA vehicle. Cahill patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'll take good care of Walter." At that moment, Walter was looking at his father through the car window, his eyes bright. He could hear and see, and Stuart, stepping into the neighbor's house again, took the box. "He's not over yet. He will never end. This is just another beginning."